So today we are going to take up another case. Okay, so far we've completed legal status of unborn, legal status of dead. In the third one would be legal status of animals. Now we could have the same kind of discussion even here. I mean, the discussion could be in terms of how animals are treated in different legal system, whether they are considered as a subject of rights. Obviously, no question of them as being subject of duties. But yeah, so in different legal systems, animals are recognized. Animals' rights are recognized to a certain extent. So our discussion could end just like that. So, and legal discussion would probably be just that. However, the discussion does not end there. So, we have certain other questions that we can raise then. That is it enough, the kind of protection that animals receive in a particular legal system? Is that enough? And if it is not, then why? How else, okay, or the legal system treat the animals? Are non-human animals to be treated the same way as humans? Or one could even say that, do animals have legal personality the way humans are considered as having, natural, personality? So all those questions are definitely there and needs to be addressed. However, just like the previous examples that we discussed, there are certain difficulties that we come across. And I will try and introduce them to you because the debates cannot be conclusively, ended here. And I have my own limitations, my own limitation of understanding. So I'll try and introduce the ideas so that you, as you apply your own understanding, as you read more, as you experience more, you eventually are going to have a better understanding of these topics and issues. So let's start with the positivistic, question of what is the legal status of animals. So I'm not going to look at what it is, in specific legal system, but how is it generally treated? Okay, how the case of legal status of animals generally treated is the one that I'm going to deal with. So we discussed earlier that persons could be of two different kind. Okay, so there could be two different kinds of legal persons. Okay, you could have natural person. Okay, they are recognized by the law, so they are definitely persons under the law. You can broadly say that yes, they naturally come within the purview of this legal personality. On the other hand, law might also, by virtue of fiction, recognize personality. Yeah, correct. So those would be your juristic personalities. So that's there, and there is no denying that quite often and mostly when the law recognizes juristic personality, it's not because of their naturalness. Okay, it could be anything. It's for the sake of efficiency, for the sake of convenience, for many different reasons that we are going to look into later on. It could be recognized. There is no limit to what can be. We discussed that already. Now the thing is, so if we apply, if we think about animals the same way, there is no restriction, there is no limit on legal systems to also, by virtue of that same fiction, also recognize personality of animals. There is no restriction on that. But we are not thinking about the issue of animals when we talk about legal status of animals or personality of animals from that fictive personality perspective, because that can be done, and if required it can be done, but then our justification in those situations are quite utilitarian. So you want, and Well, the problem is that why is utilitarian argument bad? Okay, is another thing that we have to address. But anyway, for now, all I'm trying to say is that it's possible for legal systems to say that yes, by fiction, we also recognize legal personality of so and so animal. That's there. But if we are to truly talk in terms of legal personality of animals, just the way you talk about humans, then our arguments will not be based on that fictive personality of animals. It has to be more than that. Okay, the animals are to be treated differently than other non-human things. Okay, so you may consider a corporation as a legal as having legal personality, juristic personality. But then when we talk about the corporation, we are not referring to the individuals who form it. We are referring to some abstract entity. You may also refer to an idol. Okay, it could be a stone, whatever. But we don't talk about animals that way. So it has to be. We have to when we talk about animals, personality, we have to think of them the same way we think of humans as having personality. So that's there. Okay. However, how does legal systems generally, especially in common law legal systems, okay, how does this legal system, how do these legal systems treat animals? Well, the common understanding is that animals are not persons like humans. Okay, so animals are not persons. They are not considered as persons, natural persons. They could be, if the legal system want to, certain animals, okay, as persons, but they are not considered legal persons either, okay, because they are animals, okay, that's not the case either, okay. Now, in most legal systems, animals are treated as property. So you may love your dog, you may love your cat a lot, okay, probably as much as you treat any of your family member. Maybe you love them more than anyone else. That's also a possibility. But then that in itself does not lead to them being, equal to humans. Okay, so at least from the legal perspective. Okay, so the approach that we can, see legal systems taking when it comes to animals is that they're treated like objects. They're treated like things. Okay, they are your possessions. They are your property. So remember the distinction we already made. Okay, so they are not subject of right. They become object of right. Okay, so someone harms your, loving, dog, animal, other animal. They have done some kind of property crime. Okay, sometimes something like that. Okay, I'm not referring to other laws which exist that prevent, cruelty to animals. Obviously, I haven't come to that yet. But for now, this is the idea. I'm referring broadly to this legal status of animals. The common, obviously there are many legal systems where some kind of judicial, innovation, improvements happening. So they are placed in a different category than, merely, like that of a property or object. But now the broader approach which is taken, as you can notice, is that they are treated like property. So they are not subject of rights but object of rights. So, and obviously, there's no point talking in terms of duty because you do not take them to the court and then hold them responsible. Although there were times when that also used to happen, but it doesn't happen now. So, yeah, so legal systems, as you will see, mostly treat them like objects. However, there are certain legal systems where they don't treat, animals the same way they treat, for example, chair, table, land, building. No, not like that. Okay, so in some legal systems, they're put in, different category of their own. However, that category is not too different than the one of property. There may be a little more protection than a chair, a table, or your laptop, your phone would receive. However, it's nowhere close to them being recognized as natural persons. And this is because of certain, there are certain historical reasons that I can tell you, okay, Why? That's my own understanding, though, I should admit at the outset. And how animals are treated would also vary from place to place. Cultural practices as they exist, some religious belief as well. For example, as you will see in some religions, they have this concept of purity and impurity. Some animals are considered as pure, others are as impure. Now, whether you find it in the original text or other associated readings, okay, whatever it is, okay, but it ultimately leads to, okay, it ultimately has an effect on how people of a certain belief, certain, belonging to certain religious group treat animals. Okay, it's definitely there. So yeah, so you will see that those practices, cultural beliefs, religious beliefs do play a part in how animals are perceived, and how in legal systems animals are perceived has to do to a lot extent to how animals have historically been understood. Now, if you remember, we discussed about Stoicism earlier, and Stoicism as a universal, moral philosophy talks about universal, brotherhood. Now, Stoicism is a philosophical approach in which man, women have been treated as equal, at least in theory. Okay. For example, you see Epictetus, okay, clearly talking about equality. However, even the Stoics, now obviously they were constrained by the limitations of understanding of the world as it existed. So no denying that. So maybe if Stoicism as a philosophy had evolved today, would have been different. But then you see that even Stoics didn't, consider animals as having the same kind of status as humans do. So obviously that was also under the law as it existed back then. So animals didn't receive protection the same way as humans, did. What was the reason? Humans were considered as having the capacity of reasoning, rationality. Okay, and all humans, despite the differences in their color, gender, sex, whatever, okay, they participated in the same reason as God did. So they are all worthy of being treated the same way. However, the animals were not treated that way. Okay, until very recently, animals were treated as automatons. So what are automatons? It's like one of those, like toys that you get in, fair. Okay, you just, tighten the, that key, and then, it just, moves in certain way. Okay, however, is it choosing to move that way? No one would say so. It's just how it works. Okay, there is no choice there. There is no sentience. There is no awareness. So that kind of understanding existed. Okay, so animals until very recently, okay, were thought to be like that of automatons. Okay, so they're like robots. Okay, with no sentience, no feelings. Okay, they just are like mechanical beings. Whereas unlike that, humans are different. Humans are ensouled. Okay, humans have soul, and humans have capacity of reasoning, and that puts them in a different league of their own, and are to be treated differently. So that's what existed historically. Okay, that's what the understanding has been. But modern, developments in science and technology tell us that, well, that's not the case. Okay, and if we are to treat animals as automatons, how are humans any different? Okay, so if animals do not have choice, animals do not have free will. Okay, do humans have free will? Obviously, we make wrong choices. So do animals. Okay, now that means we make choices. Okay, we make choices. Okay, could be right, could be wrong. But if they do not have the choice, what guarantees us that we also have choice? We are also subject to the same laws of physics, okay, as are applicable, same laws of nature as are applicable to other animals. However, because of our biases, okay, because we belong to this human community, so obviously we have our bias, okay. uh, we think that, okay, we are better than others. Probably in many different ways we are different from animals, but there are many other ways in which we are similar, and probably those similarities make them worthy of moral consideration. But that's something that didn't happen, okay. Especially in religious texts, you will see that although in many different religious texts, no denying that appeals are made to humans to humanly treat animals, okay. That's there. But you will see that in many religious texts, it's shown as if the rest of the creation, the rest of the world, uh, and everything in it, all the plants, all the fruits, all the rivers, everything in it, including all the animals, are there to serve the needs of humans. Although the same books might also appeal to you treating animals well. Uh, and religious beliefs, religious ideas have made their way. Religious morality have also made their way into how legal system evolved. Okay, so no wonder that legal systems haven't treated animals with the same kind of respect as it did when it comes to humans. For that matter, some religious texts also tell how human slaves are to be treated. So you don't expect much from the religious texts. But anyway, so these ideas have made their ways into how legal systems perceive of humans. So Salmon says, okay, beasts. So when he says beasts, as you have probably seen in the book, it's referring to animals. Okay, beasts are the objects of legal rights and duties, but never the subject of them. And I told you earlier that, okay, when we talk about legal personality, it's not necessary that the subject has to have both rights and duties. Okay, mere rights could also mean that they have personality. Now, why did I say so? One of the cases would be of that of animals. That does not make sense to say that you take them to court, you sue them and hold them responsible. You cannot enter into agreement with them. So obviously, definitely, that cannot be the case. Okay. Now, so would be the case with many humans who are for example, when we talked about legal status, we see that there are many constraints which are imposed to living human beings as well. Okay, one cannot enter into a contract until one is major. For and forget about that. Okay, we know that someone who's in a diseased state may not be able to make certain choices, and it definitely does not make sense to hold them responsible for any act. Okay, would that mean that they do not have legal personality? So as I told you, so we focus more on rights, but here Salmon is saying that beasts are the objects of legal rights and duties, but never subject of them. He's saying that so they do not have legal personality. That's what's being said. So he says further that beasts are capable of acts. They also have their interests. No denying, okay, interest-based philosophy. Beast animals definitely have interests, but their acts are neither lawful nor unlawful. So it does not make sense to hold them responsible. So because of that duty element, saying that, well, because of that, law does not recognize them as persons. So he says law does not recognize them as appropriate subject matter of right, and hence there is no question of permission or prohibition. Now, although he's referring to duties, then he jumps on to saying that law does not recognize them as appropriate subject matter of right. Now, why is that? It's something which is not addressed here. However, this understanding that animals do not have legal personality, okay, the legal sense in which we look at it today, has not been always the case historically. So we have many examples historically where animals have been treated the same way as legal systems treat humans. Okay, so there are many such examples. So so for example, if an animal killed their owner, they will be tried and punished the same way as humans would. So if an ox gore a man or a woman, you know, they die, then the ox shall be surely stoned, and mm, his flesh shall not be eaten. So all those things did exist. In fact, there are also stories of I think rats being banished because they destroy crops. But then the banishing process was delayed because many of these rats were pregnant. So yeah, you hear such stories. Okay, but fine. But this is not how legal systems treated of late. Okay, and there are other situations where it seems as if animals are treated as having rights. But as you will see, even in those cases, it's not really the interests of the animals or the rights of the animals that are protected, but it is that of the owner. Okay. So, for example, in law of tort, you have heard about distress damage feasant. So, if someone's animal enters your property and destroys something, then you can basically hold it until you are compensated. So, you can keep the animal until the owner or someone on behalf, okay, who's interested, pays compensation to you. However, in such situation, as you can clearly see, it's not the animal which is being held liable, but really the owner, okay, whose negligence probably led to the animal escaping and harming someone else's property. So today, it's definitely not about recognition of legal personality of animals. It's clearly the interest of the owner of the animal being talked about. Now, these ideas are based on a maxim that says that hominum causa omne jus constitum, that is, laws are made for humans. So, if laws are made for humans, so humans are the only subjects of right, not animals.
Could you please write down that maxim in the chat box?
Yeah, I will do that. Just a second. Yeah. So hominum causa omne jus constitum. Okay, laws are made for humans, and it allows no fellowship or bonds of obligation between humans and animals. Okay, so there cannot be a bond of obligation between humans and animals. But then this idea of right and protection of personality need not be based on this idea of bond of obligation. Okay, what else would it be? We will deal with that in a while. So as I told you, you may love your dog a lot, you may love your cat a lot. Okay, you may treat them probably more lovingly than you treat other humans. But if they are harmed, okay, and even if the law provides you with certain remedies, not really because the law recognizes the right of the animal, but that's the general case. But as you will see that more and more legal systems do in fact recognize, at least it says that it recognizes rights of the animals. Okay, but generally the understanding is that it's really the interest of the owner which is being protected. When it comes to trust, okay, there is no transfer that you can make to animals, but trust can be created for the benefit of a class of animals. Okay, trust can be created for the benefit of class of animals. And whereas you might also hear about this little Pomeranian dog or Shiva who are being one of the richest dogs. Okay, you might wonder how the hell is that possible. So in such case, those legal systems allow trust being created in favor of specific animal. Okay, so there is a trust. The trust owns the property, but for the benefit of the animal. So people, when the news comes, we hear that the animal is very rich. In India, we do not have that. We can only create a trust for the benefit of a class of animals. Okay. However, in India, we have laws. Okay. So prevention of cruelty to animals. Okay. And recently, there was also talk about increasing the fine, etc. So, and by these laws, it is a crime, it is an offense to harm animals. What does that mean, though? Does that mean that law is recognizing rights or personality of animals? One might say that rights are being recognized, but others will say that, well, not really the right of the animal, it's the right of humans that animals are treated in a certain way. It's the interest of humans that the animals are treated in a certain way. One might say so. But others might say that, well, it's really a case of protection of rights of animals. So you might think that, well, these are the situations where animals' interests are really being protected and hence rights are also being protected. Now see, even in this case, it is the interest theory which is of help, not really will theory. And so, yeah, and that's how, that's what the general, idea is when it comes to legal status of animals. Now, the debate does not end there, though. Okay. So that's what we can broadly, talk about when it comes to legal status of animals. Now, the debate is more of a moral debate than a legal debate. Okay, the discussion is more of a moral discussion than a legal discussion. So recently, if you remember, okay, in 2020, okay, there was a matter that had come before the Supreme Court, okay, and there was a request that, okay, there was a plea that animals are treated as legal entities, okay, like humans are. And there were certain exchanges that happened between the lawyer and the Chief Justice of India, Sharad Arvind Bobde. And there he, if I understood it correctly, okay, with my limited, capacity, he was asking questions as to how we could treat animals the same way as, we treat humans. Okay, and he also said that if we go by that logic, then tomorrow someone would say that, well, even trees, plants are to be treated. Well, that would lead to certain problems. Okay. However, I think the problem is the issue is not that simple, though. I think there are much more complex issues underneath. Okay, and those needs to be addressed. And when arguments are put before the court, all these things should definitely be put there, because those moral arguments, when the lawyers are able to make properly, might definitely then influence the judge's legal decision. So it's necessary that certain things are definitely discussed and understood. So yeah, we need to have a discussion about this status of animals, okay, at least from the moral perspective. Now, so the question that arises at this stage is that whether we should treat animals the same way as we treat, humans. That's the question that arises. Where on that, scale of moral worthiness do we place animals? And once we do that, what kind of treatment are they entitled to? These are the questions that we have to address. Now, I have shared some readings with you, I think a few days back. I'm not expecting you to read the whole thing, but at least in Peter Singer's book, you read the portion where he addresses the question of personality of animals. And definitely go through the reading the from plato.stanford.edu. Now, the thing is that why should we consider animals as having moral worth? Well, why, you may then ask this question, why should we consider humans as having any moral worth? Why is it wrong to kill a human? Why is it wrong to harm a human? Your answers could be many, okay? And some of those would be that, well, humans are sentient beings, okay? They have sentience. They are capable of reasoning, so reason, sentience. They are capable of feeling. They feel, okay? They feel pain, they feel pleasure. They are capable of suffering. They are capable of suffering. So that has to be kept in mind. You can use all these, and then say that that's why have humans have personality and humans have rights. Well, you may say so, but then as we discussed earlier, okay, there are humans, okay, who do not have, who might be comatose, okay, who do not feel the pain maybe at that point of time, or you might induce coma, or you might, use anesthesia, and that human is no longer capable of feeling pain, okay, and when they are comatose, they're not sentient anymore. They're not incapable of feeling, okay, the same way as we would. So do they lose their, rights then? They don't. They don't. So even when humans lose all these, qualities that we discussed, we still think that, humans are worthy of being, are to be considered morally, okay, worthy of moral consideration. Then why should we not treat animals the same way? Some, animals also feel, animals also suffer. They probably do not, have the sentience of the same level as we humans, do, but they do suffer. They do feel, and in some higher apes, okay, and some canids, if you have read, and there are so many. So I have this book by the author named Franz D. Wall, okay, who researched on primates, okay, so some higher apes, and he talks about, based on research on primates, okay, he tells us about how morality itself has evolved, okay. So that means what? We can see, at least in these higher primates and in certain other animals, so especially if you look at orcas and dolphins and so many other animals, okay, you see they show remarkable capacity of coordinated, acts, okay. So when they hunt, they can strategize, they can, foresee, they can, few steps, okay, ahead when they take any particular action, okay. So they are able to think to that degree, okay. So they are definitely capable of thinking, they are definitely capable of feeling, they are also capable of strategizing, and obviously in primates and many other animals, you see that they suffer the same way as humans do. So for example, monkey, if it loses its baby, it shows grief, it shows pain, and you see that in many other, in case of many other animals, even dogs, you see it. So they are capable of feeling suffering the same way as humans do. They are also capable of thinking, probably not the same way. Now, when we talk about, awareness, self-awareness, okay. Now you see that within humans also the idea of self-awareness varies, doesn't it? I mean, it varies, okay. Some people exist at a very, superficial level of existence. They are just worried about what, they're going to eat next, because that's what their concern is. So there is not no elitism here, okay. Elitism here, okay. Now we are able to talk about philosophy because we are guaranteed of our food and all that, but there are many others who probably do not, who think about all these ideas because they are concerned about what they're going to get to eat next, okay. So does that mean that they are worthy of less moral consideration? We don't say so. Many probably think that way, but that would be arrogance, okay. Now that's the thing, okay. So these examples are just to tell you that, well, these so-called, qualities that humans possess, other animals also possess. Maybe not all animals, okay. Maybe a slug is not able to perceive of the world the same way as we humans do. Maybe a bacteria, virus, doesn't, perceive of the world the same way as we do, and do not possess these qualities to the degree as we do. But then there are animals who do have these qualities. So why not treat them the same way as we treat humans? So if you look at, if you have read the readings, okay, not the whole thing, but if you have also read the introductory part, you will see that we have a bias, okay, it's clear. And what kind of bias is that? So we are humans, so we consider only humans as worthy of, being, treated certain way. So only humans are worthy of moral consideration. And we have no justification for why we consider only humans as worthy of moral consideration and not other animals who show similar traits, similar qualities. So that's because we in a very biased way, okay, in a biased way, we think that, okay, we humans are superior. So you find, okay, Peter Singer referring to racism in the same way, in the same way, that it was unfounded belief in the superiority of people who have a particular skin complexion. And even if there were certain differences, okay, certain differences always exist, okay, and those differences themselves should not be reason enough for us to say that, well, they are not worthy of any moral consideration. And if we go by that logic, that, someone's better than other, then Hitler wasn't wrong, when he was talking about eugenics, okay, when he was talking about in terms of the best, so the world will be ruled by Supermans and Spidermans and all that, okay. So I think, that idea was taken up from Nietzsche's, this idea of Übermensch. But although Nietzsche wasn't talking about it in that sense, but any idea can get corrupt. Anyway, what I was referring to is that there is a kind of bias, okay, known as speciesism, that we prefer one species over that of other. Now, forget about humans. We are hypocritical otherwise as well, okay. So quite often we are so offended by this news of, dogs being eaten in certain places, okay, where people are used to eating dogs or other animals. Now we love dogs, so we are abhorred by, okay, news like that. And we think that, well, it's morally reprehensible, disgusting. How could they do something like that? And then we say that, well, dogs are very intelligent creatures. They're able to, bond with us, interact with us. No denying that. Absolutely, that should not be there. Okay, dogs should be treated the same. Dogs should be treated, humanly. But then there are other animals who show the same level of intelligence or probably even higher intelligence, but we eat them. Okay, so pigs sometimes show much more intelligence than even dogs. But people love bacon. And the same could be said of many other animals, okay? Even birds, okay? But we love our chickens, okay? So speciesism is not only among humans and non-human animals, okay? It's also among animals that we have speciesism. And that's not very rational, okay? So if we are to say that, well, it's justifiable for us to treat one differently than others, then what is it? Is it arbitrariness there, or do we have morally justifiable reason to say that we treat them differently? Well, that's something we need to look into. I'm just leaving all this up to you. But I'm telling you that there is a lot of, biases, speciesism there. You may say that, well, dogs are able to interact with humans in a much different way than maybe certain other animals are. And because of that, we have this bias. But is it because of, how they, is it really the question of them being able to interact with us in a certain way that makes them morally worthy? So obviously, if that's the case, it's the wrong justification then. Okay, so it should not be. So yeah, so that's there, okay, but we are concerned about no animal being recognized as legal personality. Okay, so there the problem is speciesism, as Peter Singer says. So there is a quoted para here, from Peter Singer's work. If you look at the reading from Plato.Stanford, it says the racist violates the principle of equality by giving greater weight to the interest of members of his own race. When there is a clash between their interest and the interest of those of another race, so they prefer their own race. Now, this can also be scientifically explained why humans do so. Even sometimes when humans find that, well, the group that they belong to, what they're doing or what they're saying is irrational, okay, unjustifiable, but they nonetheless choose to be part of that group. Quite often they do so, but that's because humans have evolved that way, okay. And because imagine yourself 40,000 years ago in the jungles, you need the protection of your group, okay, then be rational and rebellious. It does not serve your interest, because if you're rational and if you go against your own group, when you find them to be wrong, then, well, you are on your own and your chances of survival decreases drastically. So yeah, so probably all those factors also did play a part in this. But but today we have evolved. Today we don't live in the same kind. We are not 40,000 years ago. Living 40,000 years ago, just a number. So our behavior accordingly, and our approaches, our attitudes accordingly has to change, okay, and our moral calculation should also accordingly change. But that's something that unfortunately hasn't happened, and we need to address that, okay. But that is arbitrary, is what is being pointed out here. It's not morally correct, okay. You may find explanations for that, but it's not morally correct. It's morally arbitrary. So that's what's being said. So if there is a clash between interest of two groups, you support the interest of your own group. So similarly, the specialists allow the interest of his allows interest of his own species to override the greater interest of members of other species. The pattern is the same in each case. So there is no difference between racism and also the way we treat animals. So yeah, so discrimination based on race and like discrimination based on species is thought to be prejudicial, because these are not characteristics that matter when it comes to making moral claims. Then what is it? What matters in making the moral claims? Well, there are many philosophical approaches, okay. If you have read this, okay, you will see that, yeah. So what are those philosophical approaches? So I would here refer to two approaches, okay, just for the sake of introduction. And you guys can then go back and study them in greater detail, okay. So what are those? So in moral, in questions relating to morality, we have two broad approaches, okay. There are many other approaches, but I'm essentially going to refer to two approaches. One is the approach taken by Immanuel Kant, and the other is the approach that is taken by, that was developed by utilitarians, so basically Jeremy Bentham, and really other philosophers before him, but we more appropriately attribute it to Jeremy Bentham and his philosophy of utilitarianism. Okay, so of these two, you might think that utilitarians won't be the ones who would talk in terms of rights of animals, but the reality is that Bentham's one of the first philosophers who talked about treating animals the same way as we treat humans. Now, why is that? Why does he say so? Well, that's because if you remember, his philosophy is about increasing pleasure, happiness, and reducing pain, suffering. Okay? So for him, the question is, are animals able to suffer? Are animals able to feel pain? Well, if they do, then we have to consider them in our evaluative calculation in deciding what actions are right with respect to them and what actions are wrong. So if our actions have the tendency of increasing their pain, okay, then that's not the right thing to do. So although you wouldn't think, okay, because when we talk about rights, we do not usually refer to, utilitarianism as the philosophy of right, okay, because utilitarianism, if you remember, is all about reconciling, you know balance, it's about, it's about interest, isn't it? It does not say that, well, something ought to be protected because it ought to be protected. So we come to that calculation by virtue of doing our hedonistic, calculation that involves balancing pain, suffering over, as against pleasure, happiness. But they are the ones who recognized, who emphasized on this element of pain, suffering. Okay, are animals capable of suffering? Do they feel pain? Yes, they do. They're worthy of moral consideration. That then. Now, in that calculation, humans also do not, hold a special position. Okay, humans obviously don't. Okay, now why should we consider humans as, worthy of moral consideration? Well, humans are also as much capable of pain and suffering. Okay, so they are worthy of moral consideration. So that kind of, approach was taken by Bentham. So there is a para which is referred, where Bentham is referred to. Okay, he said, Bentham, one of the more forceful defenders of this sentientist moral view, considerably. Okay, so he wrote this. Okay, other animals which, on account of their interests having been neglected by, sorry, just a second. Yeah, by the insensibility of the ancient jurists, stand degraded into the class of things. Okay, so he's referring to this problem of treating animals as things. Okay, the day has been, I grieve it to say, in many places, it is not yet past, in which the greater part of this species, under the denomination of slaves, have been treated upon the same footing as animals are still. So he's talking about how and slaves have been treated, okay, and animals are still treated that way, as he wrote, okay, at the time when he wrote. So the day may come when the rest of the animal creation may acquire those rights which never could have been withholden from them by the hand of tyranny. The French have already discovered that the blackness of skin is no reason why a human being should be abandoned without redress to the caprice of a tormentor. It may come one day to be recognized that the number of legs, the velocity of skin, or the termination of the ossacrum, I don't understand that frankly, but I understand what he is probably talking about, okay, are reasons equally insufficient for abandoning a sensitive being to the same fate. What else is it that should trace the insuperable line? Is it the faculty of reason, or perhaps the faculty for discourse? The question is not can they reason, nor can they talk, but can they suffer? So that's the approach an utilitarian takes. Utilitarian doesn't matter whether the animal is able to reason, because when we say so, well, you exclude them right at that point, okay, at that moment. Probably if science, technology is able to prove, maybe you will, but you will say that they are not able to think, reason the same way. So our level of awareness of this universe is different, isn't it? So that for a dog, they look for instant, gratification. Where do I find food? Where do I find this or that? Okay, but there might be certain dogs, who show some different traits, but mostly that's that. Okay, I now need to sleep, or I now need to drink. I now need to fetch the ball, something like that. Well, some other animals show some, complex traits than that, especially among primates. You see a different kind of bond among them. They are also able to strategize. They are also able to so I mean, yeah, they have complex, connections within their families. Okay, so that exists even among wolves. Okay, you see that they are able to strategize. Okay, so how else is it possible for such small animal to bring down you know bisons, etc. So you see that they're capable of reasoning, but then that's not the kind of reasoning that we are referring to. The fact that we humans are able to have this discussion is something that you don't see in animals. And one may even say that, well, apart from that, another thing that makes us unique is that the mode of communication. We talk, we speak. Okay, other animals don't, but then even there, many scientific research are being conducted. So, for example, whales and other animals have very complex way of communicating. But one may say that's probably not of the same level of complexity as humans have. So then say that, well, they are no longer worthy of being treated, like humans. So let's put them in water park and compel them and make them, perform tricks for us. Yeah, that's what humans do. Now, yeah, so all these would be acceptable, and in fact is being done, that they cannot reason the same way as humans do, because they are not thinking about what's going to happen 100 years later. Okay, how to prevent global warming and all those. Okay, they are not philosophizing, so they are not worthy of moral reason. Well, is that justified? Bentham would say no, they cannot take. So is that justifiable to deny them any moral consideration? Bentham would say no. Then what is important? Say, are they capable of suffering? Well, they do. We see all these, videos, and we have seen them being killed, and we find them trying to avoid that. We find them trying to avoid all those suffering, all those pain. There are examples of where a baby monkey is separated from the mother monkey, and then they die of grief. So they are capable of suffering. If they are capable of suffering, then they should be part of this discussion. So that's the approach which has been taken by Bentham. Okay. Now, as I told you, one of the difficulties with this particular approach is that it does not guarantee you any right. Okay, as long as the calculus takes you to the conclusion that their interests are to be protected. Okay, as long as it fulfills the the requirement of maximizing happiness, fine. But if sometimes we are to choose between one consequence that is extreme, involves more suffering, more pain, compared to another situation where it involves less suffering, less pain, well, then we prefer the one that involves less suffering, less pain. So if you are an animal rights activist, and you believe that animals are to be treated the same way as humans do, then you wouldn't in any way justify any suffering that animals have to wither. Okay, you will not say that. But that is something that is not guaranteed to you by an utilitarian approach. Okay, and why is that? They are merely talking in terms of suffering, reducing pain. So if it is possible for us to consume animal meat, okay, without letting them suffer, without them having to suffer, is that justified? Well, that's allowed. I end my discussion here today. I'll take up the rest of the discussion in the next class tomorrow.